What a beautiful room. I made a few notes, but I might get through some of them, I might not. We'll see what occurs in the next 50 minutes or so. So firstly, I wanted to talk to everyone about listening. And in the Three Principles community, you've probably heard a lot of people talk about listening. You've probably got some ideas about listening. You've probably got some concepts, and you may even teach other people about listening, some of you in the room. So I want to start with asking you to just throw all of that away. Even if you've heard me talk about listening before, and I know some of you have, I'm going to ask you to throw that away too. And let's take a fresh look at listening. This will be helpful for you, not just for this section of the event, but for the rest of your life, if you really take this in. I used to think about listening as an idea, and I used to love the metaphors that Three Principles teachers used to use about listening, but it was still very conceptual. Then last year, I was introduced to a fresh way of looking at listening. I tend to be a bit of a people person. And so this really worked for me, and I hope it works for you, and this is going to be a bit interactive. I want you all to think about someone, not a concept, an actual person, that if they were talking to you right now, if they were here, you would listen to them like you would not listen to anyone else. You would have the most wide open listening for them. It could be someone you've met. It could be someone, famous person you've never met before. It could be someone you know. It could be someone who doesn't know you exist. But think of an actual person. All right. Now I have a request. I'm going to request that you listen to me and to all the other speakers as if you were listening to that person. Not because I or the other speakers are that person, but because the power is in you. The power is in the listener. So if you listen to me in the next little while, and you're listening from a place of that person, not as an idea or a concept, oh, open listening or whatever, but really as if it's that person, you will get more out of this for you. If you go to the breakouts and you're listening to the people at the front of the room as if you're listening to that actual person, you'll get more out of the breakouts. If you listen to someone who's saying something that is completely not what you vibe with, but you listen to them from this place, you will hear things. And I'll do you one better. When you leave Viva, you can throw it all away. But whilst you're here, give yourself the best opportunity to hear something. So that's my first request. Perhaps you were already doing that. I'm sure none of you have been here with your arms crossed, judging people who are speaking. No one would have done that here, right? No one would have been criticizing in their heads. No. But just in case, I make that request. Now, secondly, I want to acknowledge some people. It's really important that I talked about listening first. Because what I might have done if someone was speaking at the front of the room and they start acknowledging people is switch off. Oh, he's not talking about me. Oh, he's going to do some acknowledgements. But please stay in that listening. And I invite you to join me in the acknowledgement. How can you join me in the acknowledgement? You can join me in the feeling of the acknowledgement. If the only thing you get from my talk is feel what I'm going to feel when I acknowledge these people, it will be worth it. I promise you. Sid talked about this all the time. Talked about the feeling, that feeling of love. Now, the first person or the first people I want to acknowledge, the reason I'm here, is my wife, Yamini, and my son, Ronak. Now, if you're listening to this and you have a partner, a child, or someone in your life that has enabled you to be here, please feel that same feeling. I travel a lot for work these days, and I say pretty much no to anything because I'm away so much from my wife and son, and they really are the most important thing in my world. And so for me to be here, there's a whole host of stuff that has to happen behind the scenes. There's a lot of people involved in allowing me to be here, and not only be here, but really have no worries. And I'm sure there are lots of you in the room who have people who are not here that have enabled you to be here. And I'm so grateful. I spoke to my wife and son this morning, and my wife goes, "Are you about to cry?" No. And it was this beautiful feeling. Beautiful feeling. Secondly, I want to thank you two lovely ladies here, Sheila and Sue. It can be a thankless task sometimes to do stuff like this. There's so many of us. I remember being introduced to the principles, and I would say things like, this should happen, or we should be doing this, or someone should be doing that. There is no someone. There are people doing things like you are. And there are a few hundred people here this weekend because both of you have put so much time and effort and energy into creating this. So I really want to thank you, and I hope all of you can join me in just feeling that. It's really easy for us to fall into, oh, this isn't right, or, you know, I would have done that differently, or whatever else. And really what's important is the fact that we're here. Thank you. Where's Jackie Moses? She's at the back of the room. Jackie was my partner yesterday on a breakout around money. And I'm in awe of this woman. If you don't know Jackie, please grab some time with her before the end of the event. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Where's Chechul? There. Yeah, we're going to do a breakout later today about coaching. And I've got to know this beautiful man over the last few days, and it's been a real highlight of this trip. And I'm sure all of you have met people that you didn't know existed until a few days ago. The most important thing you may hear could be from someone who's just been introduced to the principles. We've heard this weekend there's no hierarchy. There really isn't. I mean, Sid heard something from someone who didn't know what they were saying. Comes back to this thing, the power is in the listener. I could spend the whole talk just acknowledging people. I'd love to acknowledge all my mentors and coaches. People have had a profound impact on me. And I want to acknowledge every single person in this room. Thank you for being here. Otherwise I'd just be talking to myself. And don't gloss over that one. I've been listening on and off to Sydney Banks for years, and one of the things that I missed for the first 9 years or 10 years of listening to Sid was when he would talk about love. I was always pointing it outwards. It was about loving other people. When he would talk about forgiveness, it was always about forgiving other people. I was missing me out. So when I say acknowledge yourselves for being in the room, I really mean it. Thank you for whatever you've done to be here. Thank you for following your wisdom, your inner knowing that there's something in this conversation for you. So why did I say yes? Why did I say yes, I am going to fly over here and be part of this event? Well, it's not to talk about the principles. And we're going to be pointing to the principles. Believe it or not, it's not because I'm trying to sell something. Sue, you said that I am on a mission to change the coaching industry. That's true. That's also not what I said. That's not why I said yes. My mission has evolved. My vision has evolved. It's funny, every time I think I know why I'm here, something evolves and I say something different. I found myself this year saying in my coaching school that the reason we are here is to change the consciousness of the planet. I didn't realize I was going to say that until I said it. And as I've been here for the last few days, that's becoming clearer and clearer as to why we are here. We have been given a huge gift with these principles. Yesterday in Joe's talk, he used the metaphor of the hurricane. And we can all look out into the world and we can see a bunch of problems or a bunch of challenges. The really cool thing for me is, for years, I would worry about the world, or I think, oh, look what's going on. But there's nothing I can do about it. That's for someone else. Or what's going to be the solution to this war or this catastrophe or whatever? Well, I think we've been given the solution. And it's not a solution of doing. It's not a how-to solution. It's an inner solution. It starts with us and it ripples outwards. I really, really believe that. And this isn't for the people at the front of the room. This is for you. Every single person in this room. I was speaking to someone, you'll know who you are, I was speaking to someone on the first night I was here. And they said, isn't it great we're all here? It's like we've got a little army. A light army. I went, yeah. I probably will butcher it, there's a quote that's something along the lines of, never underestimate what the power of a small group of committed individuals can achieve. As I have woken up to these principles, as I've woken up to who we all are, it's not a personal thing. I realize the possibilities are so big. They're so big. And I want to enroll every single one of you in this possibility. Every single person, it doesn't matter whether you're a coach, whether you teach the principles, whether you have a job or you're retired. I want to enroll you in this small group of committed individuals. And I invite you to be bolder. Hey, what did you guys do in Spain? Oh, we're part of an organization that's changing the consciousness of the planet. That's true. Just sit with that for a second. What did you do in Spain? I'm part of a movement that is going to make the world a fundamentally better place for generations to come. That's true. Isn't that beautiful? Now, I may have had a thought if someone had said this to me, not me, not little old me, I can't do that. But why not you? If what all the speakers have been pointing to is true, if there really is no hierarchy, if there is no one wiser than you, if no one has more spiritual wisdom than you, if we are all God essence, then why not? I've been saying to a few people, the time is now. If you're looking for a sign, this is it. So how do we go about changing the planet? Where do we start? What do we do? I will offer you that it starts with you. It's inside out. One of the biggest shifts that's occurred in my world in the last year, if I could boil it down, is self-love. Really, really, truly self-love. I used to be horrible to myself. The way that I would speak to myself, I wouldn't wish on anyone. Maybe some of you can relate. And I knew intellectually it wasn't very helpful, but I kept doing it. But when I started to come back to love, every time, with real, true, genuine compassion and love for myself, it's not ego, because that's what I used to think, oh, that's going to be egotistical, it's arrogant. It's not. Then I started to be able to give it away to other people. Way easier. If I want to change the consciousness of the planet, I need to change the consciousness of Ankush. If I want to love as many people as I can, I need to start with me. So how do I go from judgment and criticism of myself to love? Well, there's a clue in Sid's teachings, and he talked about this a lot. He talked about forgiveness over and over and over again. It's certainly what I've been hearing. And so as I started to turn that inwards and apply it to me, things started to shift. And I started to forgive myself for all the judgments that I held against me. And I had a lot. Even a decade into the principles, I used to believe things like I'm unlovable. I used to believe things like if people really knew me, they wouldn't like me. I used to believe things I'm not very good at what I do, or I'm clumsy. I had a list of judgments, a huge list of judgments. And then I was judging myself for judging myself. What a bad person for thinking I'm a bad person. And I suspect I wasn't the only one. I suspect I'm not the only one. But we can't move out of judgment through judgment. Only through love. And again, you've probably heard this before, love is the answer. It really is. So the more I turned to loving myself from forgiveness and then continually coming back to that, I started to show up differently in the world. I started to be a better husband and father. I started to be a better listener. And this isn't done, by the way. There will be no end to this journey. But this started to occur. I started to think bigger, but that's not true. It's almost like bigger thoughts started to happen to me, where I would allow them to arise. And even that's not true, but something happened. And I'll say something bold. I'm going to change the consciousness of the planet. I'm not waiting for anyone. I invite you to join me, and it's going to happen. And I don't know where that came from, but I just know it. So the plan was to make this a really interactive session, and I've just been talking a lot. But I'm curious, does anyone have anything to say, or a question, or any comments? I'd love to hear from the room.
So how do we, because obviously we've come together here, I can probably use my big voice. I've got a playground voice. So we've come together here, these beautiful listeners and speakers and the other people. How do we keep the momentum, I suppose, is the, because I'm sure we all come into these things and we feel quite revved up and excited about changing the consciousness of the planet. So how do we keep moving forward together as a group here from today, from tomorrow onwards, I guess?
Thank you, such a great question. I don't have all the answers, by the way. I know, disappointing. It was a good start, wasn't it? But this is the good news, so that's the bad news. Good news is I don't need all the answers. Guess who's got the answers? Everyone's got the answers. Every single person in this room is connected to that same spiritual intelligence. Everyone. So what I found was it wasn't really a how-to question. When I dropped the, oh, I'm not good enough, whatever thought that was, or who am I thought, the path was clear. And sometimes the path is asking someone. But every single person in this room, you've got the answers. My request is, don't wait. Because you wait and then your doubts come in. And your ego mind starts playing, oh no, yeah, I was in a good feeling that I was in Spain then. This is the real world now. Or I can't do that. Or who was I to get caught up in that speech? And then you'll talk yourself out of it. Please don't do that. I love the Marianne Williamson poem. I've loved it for so many years. If you haven't listened to it or read it, please go and check it out. I won't read the whole thing, but you know, there's a line in there, we are all meant to shine as children do. Right? We're all meant to shine. Every single person. And there's already, by the way, so much good work happening. There are so many, and it's not just the speakers. So many people in this room are doing such wonderful work. And even people who are not doing this work professionally. Do not underestimate the role that you play. The love you bring to your children. I mean, we've seen the baby at the back of the room. I mean, wow, what a gift. The love that is brought to that child. Who knows what that's going to do for global consciousness in the future? The clarity you may bring. You may have your own business that's got nothing to do with the principles in terms of teaching them. And you bring this essence to that. Who knows what impact that has? And to those of you who do this work professionally, please, I'm going to say this, please wake up to what you have. Please. If you're thinking about doing this work professionally, please wake up to what you have. This isn't a cult. This isn't about evangelicalizing, whatever, I can't say the word. What's the word? It's not about being evangelical about the principles and trying to convert people to something. It's not about that. It's about knowing. Knowing what this is, knowing what this does for people. And we are so lucky. I say all the time, I am standing on the shoulder of giants. All the first generation teachers, and we've got some of them here, like we heard from Joe, Linda Ramos is hiding in the room as she does. These people have gone out when there was nothing, shared this understanding, and had incredible results. I mean, just incredible results. We have so many case studies in prisons, in businesses, PTSD, mental health, you name it. We've got results there. We've got people in this room who have had impact on other people that is not normal. It's unheard of out in the world. And this isn't about you. This isn't about me. Right? I used to get caught up in that. Who am I to do this, this, and this? Am I good enough? It's not about us. If the principles really are as impactful as everyone says they are in this room, the people at the front of the room, you don't need to be that good. Get the principles to do the heavy lifting for you. And this is such a supportive community, really. I have never asked anyone for help in this community and they've turned me down, ever. And that's not because there's something special about me. This is from day one when no one knew who I was. So if you sincerely want to help people, if you sincerely want to be part of this mission, people will help you. People want to help you. And there are people who don't even know what the principles are who want to help you. There's very few people in the world that I've come across who don't want to make the world a better place. Everyone is rooting for your success. I had a thought, I hope this is okay, what I'm going to say anyway. You can delete it afterwards, but I had a thought when I was standing at the side of the room, and sometimes I have these crazy ideas which seem good in the moment. And I was listening to the raffles, and I was struck by how generous people were. And I don't think I've actually given a raffle prize. And my assistant's going to hate me for what I'm about to say. I want to give everybody a prize. I have an online program, sell for a few £100. And it's for coaches. So it may not be for everyone in here. If you want that program, I will give it to you for free. My request is only take it if you're willing to go through it and use it to share this understanding, and change the consciousness of the planet. And after I get off stage, I'll have to talk to my assistant because he's going to kill me. He always says, think about things. Does anyone else have any questions? Like I say, I'd love to make my contributions interactive.
What's your background and how did you get into the principles?
That'd be a good thing to talk about, wouldn't it? I haven't even said who I am. Hello, I'm Ankush. So, yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So, I'm 41, and when I was 28 years old, I had been in personal development for about 9 years at that stage, and I just kept doing programs and courses and had coaches, and it was my only hobby. So I was a barrel of laughs at parties. And I did this program, and it was a 3-month program, and the first week, they had a different title, different theme every week, and the first week the theme was, it's called Designing Your Life. And they had an idea, and this could be relevant for you in the room, and maybe listen to it and apply it to you. And they said, there's 2 ways of showing up in the world. One way of showing up in the world is being really driven towards a goal. And they said most people are driven towards a goal. Like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And I was like, oh, that's me. I had my life plan, which hadn't quite worked out, but I was still trying to drive towards a certain place. And what they said is there's a different way of being in the world, and that's being drawn. What is your heart drawn to? Not driving, but what are you drawn to? And I realized I'd never really asked myself that question. And then they went on to say, if you don't know the answer to this, well, that's the most important thing to figure out. What are you drawn to? So I spent 2 years trying to figure out what I was drawn to, and I was trying all sorts of things. And then after 2 years, I hadn't really got any further forward. I tried a bunch of things that seemed cool, but didn't really light me up. You could say I was looking for my purpose, or I was looking for my vision or something. So in my wisdom, one weekend, I thought, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to put some more thought on this. That'll do the trick. So I spent the whole weekend thinking. That's all I did. Just think some more. And as you can imagine, I just went around in circles. Same thoughts, nothing new. There was no space for new thought. There's no space for a new idea. So the weekend goes, I go back to work, and I'm like, no, that was a bust. But I'm no worse off than I was on Friday. So I forget about it. That evening, I was cooking vegetable fajitas. And I had an idea. I had a thought. You could say that God spoke to me. It was this voice with absolute clarity said, you should be a coach. And that was kind of odd because coach hadn't even made my short list, hadn't even made my long list. And about 10 or 12 days later, I'm sitting in a hotel room near Heathrow Airport talking about or listening to the principles, and I'm on a year-long training. So I thought, right, my purpose is to be a coach. That's what my job is. And then that evolved. I was sitting in a similar sort of room a couple of years later, and we had this exercise which was we're supposed to talk our vision or our purpose. So I thought, well, my vision is to be a coach and do it full time. At that point in time, I still was in a full-time job. And I found some different words coming out of my mouth. And the words that came out of my mouth was, my purpose is to be at the vanguard of taking the principles out into the world. I didn't even know what vanguard meant. I still don't. So I started saying that. And then that evolved. A year later, I started working with coaches, and I had so much thinking about that. And what people may not have seen on social media, I'm a lot on social media, was I really cared what people thought. I really cared what people thought, and I'm so grateful to the principles, because every time someone would say something or get criticized or something would happen online, it would be an opportunity for me to come back and say, well, even this is thought. You know, a lot of people talk about being in a nice feeling. Well, for me, I went through a year of terror with the principles, because what happened is I lost all my excuses. So I would show up in the world, oh, that looks uncomfortable. So you're thinking, shit. Take the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And then last year, like I said, I found myself saying, my role is to change the coaching industry. I don't know where that came from. I'm not even qualified as a coach. But it doesn't matter. So I have a background, I can talk about a bunch of stuff. I came from the corporate world. There's loads of stuff. It's stuff, it's content, it's experience. But none of that has anything to do with that inner guidance. I was listening to an old Sid talk a couple of days ago, hoping some of it would go in and I'd speak some wisdom today. And he was talking about God's will. And I was like, I never get this bit, I never understand. And he said something like, talking about free will and God's will, and realizing on one level we have free will, on another level there is no free will, it's all God's will. And what's making sense for me right now is when I slow down to the speed of life, well, I'm guided by something, some other force. That's not my intellect. It doesn't matter what the mind says or my thinking says. And it can go both ways. It could be, for me, it was a lot of who are you to do this? It was a lot of keeping me small. But it's the other way too. So when I just ignore all of that, and it's not even about trusting. You don't need to trust that voice. Test it. I dare you. I double dare you. I don't know anyone who has trusted that voice, I don't know anyone who's tested that voice that it's gone badly for. And you'll hear so many people speak about this, whether it's in this community or in other communities. When we're willing to show up, regardless of whatever your thinking says, and there's that knowing, and you all have that. It guides you. I want to say one more thing, and then I know I'm going to be out of time. I had an ego around the principles for years. I'm not pointing to ego. I would close my mind to anything else. And one day I thought, if the principles are really true, they've got nothing to be afraid of. I've got nothing to be afraid of. I can look elsewhere and trust my wisdom to take what's good from elsewhere and align it to the principles. So a couple of years ago, I started working with a coach who wasn't 3 principles based. Shock horror. But there was something that was pulling me in that direction. And I moved forward and I kept open-minded as best as I could. And I started to get insights around the principles. A lot of what I've talked about today has been informed by that work. And I started to see my self-judgments. I started to see where I wasn't really in line with this understanding. I started to see the edge of my blind spots. And I started to see the limitations I had created. Now, if you want to see the limitations you've created, I'll offer you this. And this isn't from any pressure point of view, just see it as an exploration. If you were to rate your life, different areas of your life out of 10, you don't need to tell anyone this, see where it's not a 10. Be real. Because for me, there were lots of places where my life wasn't a 10. My marriage wasn't a 10. My health wasn't a 10. My business wasn't a 10. My finances were not a 10. And that was okay. But to move them forward, guess what I needed to do? See the principles deeper. It wasn't going in a different direction. I think it's 5:02, which is my time. Thank you all for listening. I love you.